Imagine this: a village scorched by drought, cracks splitting the earth, empty stomachs, hollow eyes. But in the heart of despair, Iyabo, the widow who defies death itself. Every dawn, she drinks a mysterious yellow brew, and her grain never runs out. The villagers call it witchcraft, but fear keeps their mouths shut. Tayo, a sharp, city-bred skeptic, back to uncover the science behind the magic. What he finds? A secret darker than the parched soil. Ancient grudges. A curse masquerading as a miracle. And a choice: expose the truth and risk chaos, or let the village starve clinging to lies. In a place where survival is a knife's edge, one question remains. Would you dare expose the truth? Or would you let the shadows devour them all? The village of Osun lay parched beneath the relentless African sun. Its once fertile lands reduced to cracked earth and brittle husks of dying crops. The river had shrunk to a sluggish trickle, barely enough to quench the villagers' thirst, let alone sustain their fields. Hunger crept through the village like a shadow, its fingers wrapping around every home, every family. The people of Osun grew thin, their livestock withered, and their spirits waned. Yet, amid the suffering, one household flourished. Nestled at the edge of the village where the land met the sacred Osun forest, stood the compound of Iyabo, a widow who had outlived her husband by more than a decade. While her neighbours' fields lay barren, hers were verdant, bursting with life. Her goats were plump, her children never knew hunger, and her clay pots brimmed with fresh water when others scraped at the bottom of their wells. Her wealth was no secret, and neither was the unease it bred among the villagers. People whispered behind cupped hands, their voices laced with fear and suspicion. They had seen her ritual at dawn, how she would sit behind the woven walls of her hut, lift a clay pot to her lips and drink. No one knew what the pot contained, but rumours spread like wildfire. She drinks her own water, some murmured. A witch's brew, others said. That is why her gardens never die. They did not dare to confront her, yet they shunned her all the same. It was into this tense and troubled village that Tayo arrived. A man of numbers, calculations, and modern logic, he had left the comfort of the city to seek out the wisdom of the old ways, ways that might offer answers to the crises of the modern world. His curiosity ignited like dry tinder when he heard of Iyabo and her unnatural prosperity. He had come searching for knowledge, but what he would find in Osun was far more than he had ever expected. Tayo moved through the village, speaking with anyone willing to talk. He had been in Osun for only 3 days, but whispers of Iyabo's unnatural wealth clung to the air like the dust kicked up by the dry winds. "Her gardens never die," one old woman muttered, kneeling over a shriveled yam patch. "Even when the rains betray us." "She does something behind closed doors," another villager whispered. "No one sees, but we all know." At the marketplace, a young mother, her ribs stark beneath her faded wrapper, scowled at the mention of Iyabo's name. "Her children never go hungry. Why do ours?" But not all the stories were the same. Some feared Iyabo, others envied her, and a few defended her. "She does not steal from anyone," a middle-aged man named Bayo scoffed. "Her hands are in the soil before the sun rises, long before yours or mine." Tayo jotted down notes in his worn leather journal, intrigued by the contradictions. What was the truth? Later that evening, he sought out the chief of Osun, a man named Baba Ade, whose weary eyes spoke of many seasons of hardship. "You are new here, city man," the chief said, sipping palm wine, "and you ask too many questions." "I only seek knowledge," Tayo replied. The old man studied him for a long moment before setting his gourd down. "Then know this. Leave Iyabo alone." Why? The chief's voice dropped to a near whisper. There are forces in this world best left undisturbed. Some say she was blessed by the gods, others say something darker. She has what no widow should have: wealth, power, independence. He exhaled sharply. Such things do not come without cost. Tayo frowned. You think she paid a price? The chief nodded. And you will too if you pry too deep. But Tayo was not one to be easily scared off. It wasn't until he met Elder Odewale, a hunched man with sunken eyes, that he realized how deep the village's fear ran. She is a fraud, city man, Odewale hissed. A deceiver, or worse. Tayo raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The elder leaned in close, his breath hot and foul. They say she spills blood in the night. Tayo's stomach turned. Human blood? Odewale nodded grimly. Children go missing. The rains do not come, and yet she prospers. That is no accident. Tayo had encountered rumors and superstitions before, but this was different. There was hatred in Odewale's voice, personal, sharp as a knife. Do you have proof? Tayo challenged. Odewale spat on the ground. Ask her yourself, if you dare. And so, ignoring every warning, Tayo found himself outside Iyabo's compound the next morning. He had expected filth, secrecy, something that would hint at the dark practices the villagers feared. Instead, he found something else entirely. The land inside her gates was alive. Rows of green cassava plants stretched tall. Mango trees bore heavy fruit, and goats, fat unlike the skeletal animals outside, wandered lazily. Water sat in large clay pots, cool and plentiful. It was not magic, it was a system. Organized, disciplined, thriving. Iyabo, standing in the shade of a baobab tree, watched him with knowing eyes. So, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. You have come. Tayo swallowed. Teach me. She considered him for a long moment before nodding. Then you must follow my rules. And just like that, his apprenticeship began. Tayo stood before Iyabo's compound, a modest yet well-kept homestead that contrasted sharply with the parched land surrounding the village. Lush vegetation thrived within her fences. Her livestock were plump, and her granary overflowed, while others sat nearly empty. He knew the rumors, but his logical mind refused to accept superstitions at face value. There had to be an explanation, and he was determined to uncover it. Iyabo agreed to take Tayo as an apprentice, but only on one condition. He must follow her instructions without question for one full moon cycle. If he failed, she would cast him out, and he would leave with nothing but the knowledge he had gained. Despite the veiled warning, Tayo accepted without hesitation. His first task was laborious, tilling the dry soil in the early morning, just as Iyabo did every day. He watched her, puzzled by her diligence. The land is barren, he argued. It hasn't rained in weeks. Why waste your energy? Iyabo only smiled and gestured for him to continue. As he toiled under the scorching sun, he noticed small irrigation channels lined with clay, directing water from hidden reserves. Iyabo had devised a system to collect and conserve water when others had let theirs evaporate in the relentless heat. During the afternoons, Tayo helped Iyabo gather rainwater from large clay pots strategically placed around her compound. He realized she did not drink directly from the infamous clay pot the villagers spoke of, at least not in his presence. She rationed water with precision, using it to cultivate hardy crops and ensure her livestock remained healthy. Nature always provides for those who prepare, she told him. At night, Tayo observed how Iyabo handled her finances. She bartered wisely, never accepting an unfair trade, and always reinvesting in the resources that sustained her household. Unlike others who spent their last grains of rice on desperate gambles at the market, Iyabo stored her wealth in tangible, replenishable goods. The village watched Tayo's involvement with skepticism. Mocking whispers followed him wherever he went. "The city boy has fallen under her spell," they sneered. "He will be nothing but her puppet." Tayo ignored them, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Could there be truth in their claims? Was Iyabo truly just a shrewd woman, or was there something darker at play? Meanwhile, Elder Odewale saw an opportunity. He had always resented Iyabo's success, viewing it as a threat to his influence. He began sowing seeds of discord, stirring the villagers' fears. "No widow prospers while others suffer," he declared. "She has made a pact with forces beyond our understanding." Determined to prove her guilt, Odewale set a plan in motion. He sought out a desperate, starving villager, someone with nothing to lose, and whispered a dangerous proposition into his ear. "Find out what she hides in that clay pot," Odewale urged, "and you will be rewarded beyond your dreams." Unaware of the growing conspiracy against her, Iyabo continued to teach Tayo. The young man was beginning to see the logic behind her ways. But logic alone could not shield him from the storm that was coming. A storm that would force him to choose between truth and deception. Elder Odewale had always envied Iyabo's inexplicable prosperity. While the village withered under the relentless drought, her lands flourished and her stores overflowed with food. He whispered accusations of witchcraft, stirring resentment among the desperate villagers. But words alone were not enough. He needed proof. And so he set his plan into motion. A desperate villager named Serif, whose family had not eaten in 2 days, became Odewale's pawn. Promises of wealth and a position of influence lured Serif into the elder's grasp. "Watch her," Odewale instructed, his voice smooth as oil. "See what she does in the dead of night. Find out where her magic lies." That night, under the cover of darkness, Serif crept toward Iyabo's hut. The flickering glow of a lantern barely pierced the woven reeds of the walls. He pressed his ear to the structure, straining to hear. A faint, rhythmic chanting reached him, though the words were indecipherable. Gathering his courage, he peered through a gap in the wall. Inside, Iyabo sat before her clay pot, the vessel villagers feared yet desired. With measured hands, she lifted the pot to her lips and drank deeply. The liquid shimmered unnaturally, a silver sheen catching the light. Her expression remained serene, her eyes closed as if in deep meditation. Serif's breath caught in his throat. He turned and fled, his heart pounding. By dawn, the village was alive with whispers. The rumors spread like wildfire. Iyabo's power came from that cursed pot. Was it blood? Was it the essence of stolen souls? The fear that had simmered for years boiled over into rage. By midday, a mob had formed. Men and women, driven by hunger and suspicion, stormed toward Iyabo's compound. Odewale led the charge, his voice booming. "Iyabo, you have deceived us for too long." He pointed an accusatory finger. "We demand the truth." Iyabo emerged calm as ever, her steady gaze sweeping over the crowd. She met Tayo's eyes, silently pleading for him to trust her. He stood frozen. The rational side of him knew that wealth and survival often had practical explanations, but the fear radiating from the villagers was infectious. If he defended her, would he become an outcast too? Odewale stepped forward. "Show us the pot. Prove you are not a witch." The villagers roared in agreement, surging forward. Iyabo lifted a hand and miraculously they hesitated. "Is this how we treat our own?" she asked, her voice unwavering. "With accusations instead of gratitude?" "Gratitude," a woman spat. "While we starve, you thrive. What is in that pot? What dark magic do you wield?" Tayo's mind raced. He had seen her methods firsthand, her discipline, her resourcefulness. He knew the answer lay in logic, not superstition. But the villagers wouldn't listen to reason. His heart pounded. If he exposed the truth, would it save her or would it condemn her further? His decision would change everything. The village square was packed, a sea of faces lit by the flickering glow of torches. Iyabo stood in the center, bound at the wrists, her face impassive. The elders sat in a semicircle, their expressions a mix of judgment and curiosity. The crowd murmured in anticipation. Some demanded her punishment, others simply sought the truth. Elder Odewale stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. Iyabo, you have long defied the struggles of this village. Your wealth, your crops, your livestock, while the rest of us suffer. Do you still deny the charge of witchcraft? Iyabo met his gaze steadily. I have never denied anything. I only do what is necessary. A wave of whispers passed through the crowd. Tayo stood at the edge, heart pounding. He had seen enough to understand. He knew the real reason for Iyabo's success, but if he revealed everything, the village's greed could destroy her. He had to be careful. I will speak, Tayo announced, stepping forward. The elders turned to him with expectation. Iyabo is not a witch. What she does is wisdom, not sorcery. Elder Odewale scoffed. Wisdom? Then explain it, city boy. Tayo took a deep breath. She saves her resources. She harvests during scarcity, stores when others waste, and invests when opportunities arise. She follows discipline that we have abandoned. That is her secret. A murmur of confusion spread among the villagers. They had expected something dark, something supernatural. But this, it was almost disappointing. Lies, Odewale sneered. Then what of the clay pot? What of the rituals? Speak the full truth, boy. Tayo hesitated. The gold dust. He had discovered it himself. Iyabo's wealth was partly built on an ancient practice of filtering specks of gold from the river sediment, a secret the villagers had forgotten. If he spoke of it, greed would consume them all. No, he would keep that truth buried. The clay pot is nothing but a tradition, Tayo said firmly, a symbol of discipline, nothing more. Some of the villagers nodded, others remained unconvinced. The elders whispered among themselves. Finally, the chief raised a hand for silence. Iyabo, do you have anything to say in your defense? She turned to the crowd, her voice even. If my knowledge is a crime, then judge me as you see fit. But what I know, I have earned through patience, not sorcery. There was a long silence. Then, slowly, some villagers began to nod. A few even murmured in agreement. The chief studied Iyabo, then Tayo. This matter is complex. We will decide tomorrow at sunrise. Let the woman be guarded until then. Odewale's face twisted in frustration, but he said nothing. The crowd slowly dispersed, the tension lingering in the night air. Tayo exhaled shakily. He had protected her, for now. But he knew the battle was far from over. The village was still divided, with whispers of Iyabo's so-called sorcery lingering in the air. Though Tayo's explanation had swayed some minds, fear and superstition clung to others. None were more determined to prove Iyabo's guilt than Elder Odewale. He had spent years sowing doubts about her, and now his influence was slipping away. If he could not convince the village with words, he would do so with action. One night, under the cover of darkness, Odewale crept toward Iyabo's hut. He had bribed a young boy to watch her movements, and from his information, he knew where she kept her mysterious clay pot, the supposed source of her unnatural wealth. If he could seize it and prove she was hiding something sinister, the village would have no choice but to turn against her. Silently, he pushed open the door, his heart pounding. There it was, the clay pot glimmering faintly in the dim moonlight. He approached it cautiously, expecting to find something dark, something forbidden. But as he reached out to grasp it, a sudden force slammed him to the ground. Iyabo stood over him, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Tayo and several villagers who had grown suspicious of Odewale's actions emerged from the shadows. "You accuse me of deception, yet here you are sneaking like a thief in the night," Iyabo said, her voice calm but firm. The villagers gasped as they realized what was happening. Odewale had not come to expose a truth, he had come to steal. His actions had condemned him. Cornered and with no way to escape, Odewale stammered excuses, but the people had seen enough. The village chief stepped forward. "You have spread lies, sown discord, and sought to destroy a woman who has only helped us thrive. Your greed has poisoned this village long enough." A decision was made. Odewale was banished, his power stripped away. The very people he had manipulated turned their backs on him as he was forced to leave. As dawn broke, the village stood in silence, finally free from Odewale's deception. Iyabo remained standing tall, her secret safe, except for one person. Tayo, who had glimpsed the true secret of the clay pot, knew he had a choice to make. Would he leave it buried, or would he one day use it himself? With Elder Odewale gone, the village gradually settles into a new era. The accusations and paranoia that once fueled their fear of Iyabo begin to fade, replaced by curiosity and admiration. People start to realize that her success was not due to witchcraft but wisdom, patience, and a deep understanding of the land's hidden riches. Iyabo, despite everything, holds no grudges. She continues to share her knowledge, though cautiously. She teaches the women how to store grains properly, how to reinvest small profits into their businesses, and how to sustain themselves even in the face of drought. Inspired by what he has learned, Tayo introduces the idea of a village-wide savings and lending system, allowing the people to pool resources and invest in each other's ventures. The once desperate villagers who had fought over scraps now have a structured way to build their wealth. Slowly but surely the village begins to flourish. However, Tayo keeps one secret to himself, the true source of Iyabo's initial wealth. The gold dust she had been carefully extracting from the riverbed remained her guarded truth, one that he knew would lead to greed and destruction if widely known. He records her story in his journal, capturing the lessons of resilience and deception. But he omits the one detail that could corrupt everything they had built. Iyabo's legacy is not one of material riches, but of wisdom passed down to those willing to learn. Even after she is gone, her methods live on, transforming the village into a beacon of prosperity. Tayo departs, forever changed by his time there. He knows the world beyond will never fully understand what he witnessed, but some knowledge, he realizes, is too dangerous to share. Do you believe Bayo should have exposed the true source of Iyabo's wealth? Share your thoughts and lessons from this story in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.